I researched around 1,000 couples going through infertility. And we found a lot of really interesting predictors of what brings couples together and what drives them apart. But one of the most interesting things that brings couples together during the infertility experience is humility.
I want to help people rewrite the stories that they tell themselves, the stories that they've allowed to be spoken over them, the stories that they've agreed to that were never true. And shame has written so many of them for so many people.
Shame is, as you know, Justine, is such a prevalent part of the infertility experience. There's, am I man enough? Am I woman enough? I did a research study looking at the experience of men going through infertility. And one theme that came up from time to time was this idea that I'm the weak link in the chain.
Welcome to Courage is Built Here, the podcast. I'm Justine Froelker, licensed professional counselor, author, speaker, and corporate trainer. Here, we bring my Courage is Built Here curriculum to life and community. Each week, I invite a guest to walk one of the 5 courageous pathways with me through authentic, sometimes tough, sometimes hilarious conversations. No performance, no polish, just real people practicing real courage with grit, grace, and a whole lot of love. Hi, friends. Welcome back to the Courage is Built Here podcast. Today, we have Pathway 5, Do the Work. How to live courageously. This is where we bring all of the work together. It's all of it. It is living from your values. It's feeling your feelings well, taking care of yourself. It is how to show up authentically, be all of who you are. It is loving and leading others well with skills like operationalizing trust and using curiosity and humility and empathy. And it's also do the work, Pathway 5. It is the work of how to reclaim and rewrite stories, the stories that have been spoken over us, the stories that we have been told, the stories that we have agreed to, contracted with, the lies that we have allowed to take root in our brains and souls and hearts that were never, ever meant to be there. It's the stories that we make up when things just get hard and uncomfortable and we're all up in our feelings. It's the stories that have been born of some of the toughest seasons of your life. We reclaim them and we rewrite them into truth. And today's guest is, it's good. So my friend, Dr. Clay Brigance is here, and he is a psychologist. He owns a counseling practice called Shiloh Counseling here in St. Louis, and he researches, his research is all about couples going through the infertility journey. And I got to meet Clay and his wife, Marjorie, at church several years ago at this point, many years ago, when they told their story to someone and they're like, you have to meet Justine Froelker. And Clay was like, I remember like you sat down and you're just like, okay, I just need to know, like, what do you need of this? Because I'm big on boundaries. And it was like, I don't do therapy anymore. And so, but I can be a friend or maybe mentor. Like I was trying to like, how do I help you? And so Clay tells a little bit of their story, and he is so wise in how we turn toward one another through times of trauma and hardship. For him and Marjorie, it was through the infertility journey. And he talks a lot about really like something that he had really identified with his whole life. And when it was possibly not going to happen, how do you reclaim that? Grab a cup of tea. As he describes himself, he's like an old British man in a tweed jacket. Grab a cup of tea. Maybe some tissues for some of you. We do talk about infertility and loss in this episode, obviously. And even if your life hasn't been touched by that personally, I'm willing to bet it has been, because the numbers are shocking. 1 in 6 couples in the United States will struggle to conceive. 1 in 4 pregnancies ends in a loss. And I believe it's still 1 in 160 pregnancies ends with a child born still. I believe Clay shares a stat that almost like 50% of Americans know someone, or like infertility has touched their lives in some way. So this affects somebody that you know, I promise, even if they've never shared it with you. And I encourage you to stick around and listen. Um, and yeah, I'm going to pull this card in honor of my motherhood and my 3. So welcome, Clay, to the podcast. Welcome, Clay, to the Courage is Built Here podcast. Thank you, my friend.
Hey, I am so excited to be here. So excited. And I just realized there's some construction going on in the office next door.
Oh.
So if you need me
I
to like
can't
get
hear
up and
it
tell them,
because you're
okay,
in
good.
your own podcast studio with a fancy mic. Plus, we have producers to help us with that.
No, exactly.
I know. I think you're probably going to be, barring anything catastrophic, you will probably be the episode that the producers was like, we didn't even have to touch the audio or do nothing on.
Yes.
Oh, I love it. I love it. Well, thank you for being here.
Absolutely.
Let's start you off. Question I begin everyone with, based off of the pathway that you chose. When you think about courage, most especially through that lens of pathway 5, do
Right.
the work, reclaiming, rewriting our stories. Like, is there a moment or a story that comes up for you?
I'm laughing because, Justine, if you and I were having a conversation just like out in the wild, you know exactly what I would talk about. You know the story, you know all of that.
Yep.
And for the listeners of this amazing podcast, you need to know about my story with my wife, our infertility story, because that story started in 2017. And we were, before you hit record, Justine, we were talking about how we met and how a friend of ours introduced us frantically. Um, and through that connection that we gained with you and with Chad, we started to figure out, Justine, that it wasn't just us experiencing infertility and miscarriage. There's so many people. I mean, there's a stat that this is an old stat, by the way, 2017. No, excuse me, 2018. 48% of Americans either have experienced infertility themselves or know someone who has. Uh, so my dream growing up in a small, tiny town in Kentucky, which, by the way, shout out to Muhlenberg County if you're listening. I love you guys. Uh, so growing up in this tiny town, you know, I never really thought that I would be a speaker or be, you know, or really leave the town. Honestly, Justine, I mean, everybody kind of stays there, which is great, and it's a beautiful thing. It's a beautiful part of that culture, um, and I think you know we've talked about you grew up in Iowa,
Yeah,
right?
small town too.
So
But you're right.
you
Like, so
know
many
that,
people say,
yeah.
it's like I was one of the few that was like, I'm going to Kirksville, Missouri. Like, yeah,
Yeah.
like, let's go.
Exactly. Exactly. And so you know, it's almost like this feeling, Justine, of, you know, I'm just a guy from a poor town in Kentucky.
Yeah.
That's just who I am. And it's almost like that was such and gosh, you know, to your listeners, I just want to say there's so many layers to that. There's so many layers to that kind of insecurity, that kind of uh, not really believing in my calling and what I've been set apart to do. And so, but what I did see growing up was my mom and my dad, and being incredible parents, and knowing what that's seeing and knowing what that's like to experience family. And then that intersected with my masculinity, and what does that mean to be a real man? It means being a dad. It means being a provider.
Yep.
You know, so so I fell in love with this beautiful, beautiful woman named Marjorie, and she's a St. Louisian, and St. Louisians typically don't leave. You know, always tell the, you know, this is the first time, you know, I guess
Yeah.
your audience probably heard this in the introduction. I'm a couple therapist, and I always tell my couples that St. Louis is the city of son-in-laws. You know,
That's
so
true.
yeah. So Marjorie, my wife, she's you know, got roots here for generations, and I was looking for a job at the time, and so we moved here, lived here, um, and um, and so that was like slowly me like going out of my comfort zone. But then when in 2017, when we decided, Justine, it's time to start a family, it was a failed pregnancy test. And then it was another one, and then it was another one.
Yeah.
Um, and for your listeners that are listening right now that have experienced infertility, they're probably feeling that tension in their
Yep.
chest that I'm feeling right now in this moment of even just recalling
Yeah.
that. Um, and so there was just this forced, um, forced altering of who I thought
Hmm.
I needed to be as a man, who I who I wanted to be just as a human, um, because suddenly this one thing that drove all of my identity was out of my reach.
Yeah.
Um,
Hmm.
and there was so much shame in that. And I would, we're going to talk more about that in this episode, I hope,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
shame is such a powerful
Yep.
force. Um, there was so much isolation, and also there was, and I'm gonna say this word, and I hope your listeners,
Hmm.
um, hear me out. There was beauty because there were other men that came alongside me, that poured into me, that prayed for me, um, and all of that mixed together, and it
Yeah.
was ugly. It was just messy and gray, um and as we went through that journey, um, for 2 years, we struggled back and forth, and, eventually, we got our oldest, Jonah, in 2019,
Mhm.
and but something I found, Justine, was, like, through that experience, Marjorie and I's marriage actually got stronger. And so I literally had this moment. I was sitting there, Justine, sitting in our living room, and I was like, I was doing some prayer, some reflection, and I
Mhm.
just said, "What? Whoa, wait a minute. What the heck? Like,
Yeah.
why are we not biting each other's heads off? Why are we? Because the stress is so intense. The
Yeah.
progesterone shots, the 2 week wait,
Yeah.
it failing. We got to wait again. The miscarriage, the all the other medical complications
Yeah.
that that go wrong for couples that go through this, and professionally at the time, I was a school psychologist, which means I was somebody who worked in mental health, but I worked in the
Yeah.
schools doing assessments for special education because I knew that I needed to be a mental health professional, but I wanted the summers off to like be be there for my family.
Yeah.
So everything, my career decision,
Right.
everything was all about being a dad. And so when that just totally got upended,
Yeah.
I knew that was a moment to answer your question more
Mhm.
succinctly, Justine.
Yeah.
Um, that was the moment where I knew I have to step into something so scary. And that is getting a PhD in counseling and figuring out this question of why. Why do some couples turn towards each other during infertility?
Mhm.
Why do some couples fall apart? 25% of couples that go through
Yeah.
infertility find that their relationship is stronger. 30% report that the infertility experience is so difficult that they get divorced or they separate.
Yeah.
So
Wow.
I got I um I turned in just those few short months of making that decision and deciding this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to be a square peg in a square hole, and I'm going to do the thing that that I'm called to do, that I'm built
Yeah.
to do. I'm going to be a couple therapist, and I'm going to figure out this question why, and I'm not going to stop until that
Yeah.
25% becomes 100%, and
Mhm.
that all couples going through infertility and miscarriage and loss can find comfort and love in their spouse. There's a metaphor that I like to use with couples that I meet for the first time or going through infertility, Justine, of I felt like infertility was me being in this boat by myself, and it's a tiny boat. It's not a ship. It's like a tiny
Yeah.
boat. We could even say it's like an inflatable
Uh-huh.
that's like leaking.
And it might have a hole. Right.
It's got a hole.
Uh-huh.
It's got a
And I don't
hole.
think I have oars on some days. Like,
There's
yeah.
there's no oars, and
Yeah.
I'm in the middle of the ocean. Also, for your listeners, I don't know if I've told you this, Justine, but I have a pathological fear of the deep ocean. So like that just adds to the metaphor. So side note, I tried to remedy that fear by getting qualified in scuba diving. That just made it worse.
Oh my gosh. No, that
So
would be too far for me. No, I couldn't do it. I mean,
yeah,
good for you for trying. And
I tried.
no.
I tried, my friend. Uh, but so I'm in this boat, and the waves are crashing. There's a big storm, and I'm paling water, and I'm wondering, am I going to survive?
Yep.
And not, I don't mean physically, but like just
Yeah.
what my identity
Mhm.
is, my spiritually,
Yeah.
existentially, and I'm bailing water, and I am just hoping that somebody sees me. But I turn to the back of the boat, and Marjorie's paling with me, and she's like,
Yeah.
"What are you doing? Don't look at me! Like pale,
Right.
like
Right.
you know." And so that's the metaphor I like to use,
So good.
Justine, because I like, we looked to the other part of the boat towards each other.
Yes.
Some couples get so overwhelmed, and understandable,
They're
but
looking away.
yeah, and they're jumping ship, and
Yep.
they're saying, "I can't do this. I'm done."
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
yeah, so
Yep.
so I got my PhD, and I
Yeah.
just, did the research. I've researched over 1,000 couples going through infertility, and I've been a speaker at the American Psychological Association. I've got a book coming out,
Yep.
and, it was published by the American Psychological
Huge.
Association. It's called Couple Therapy for Reproductive Grief. That's coming out quarter 4 of next
Amazing.
year. So, but all of that wouldn't have been possible, uh, without talking back to my fear, and I
Mhm.
would love to talk to about that a little bit more,
Yeah.
uh, but I don't wanna I feel like I'm going on a diatribe
No,
here.
you're good.
This
You're good. Well, like, there's a piece of I mean, do the work to reclaim and rewrite our
Right.
truth. Like, the desire, the want and need, the
Mm,
identity to be a
mm,
dad, and, like, there how much of what we thought it was supposed to be, what we've dreamed for, what we've prayed for,
yeah,
what those of us who've gone through infertility, what we've paid for, right? Like,
100%.
right, and then it is the rug is swept out from underneath you, and because it is can be so wrapped up in our identity, which means it's the stories that we tell ourselves especially, or the stories that have been spoken over us, or all of these things. I do think there comes a point, no matter how the journey ends up for anyone in the infertility and loss community, I do think that there is this point of, am I how will I rewrite this to be redeemed?
Mm, mm,
And so, like, you did that and, like, "Okay, I'm gonna answer this question that the world is in desperate need of," right? And I've written in my books, like, I guess I refuse to be a sad, bitter shell of who I once was, all because of these losses, right? Like,
mm,
I just couldn't like, for it to be for like, truly nothing, like, not only did we not get the kids, but, like, it also destroyed us and me, like, I guess. And so that
mm,
maybe it was just my stubbornness, but there so much you've had to rewrite that identity, and it's still at the same it's just a new version of it.
mm, hmm. Man, I just felt so much to wash over me, Justine, when you were said, like, I felt like I was just being stubborn, like I just like refused to let it take any more of me, you
Right.
know. I was speaking at the Institute of Reproductive Grief Care out in San Diego, which, by the way, incredible resource.
Awesome.
They've got all kinds of free resources for couples, folks like us that have gone through
Yep.
infertility. Um, I was speaking at their symposium, and somebody came up to me afterwards, and she said, "You know what? I could tell that when you were up there talking, that you were talking with a little bit more intensity. It was almost like you were punching back against infertility when you were up there speaking." So it's like there was
Yeah.
this in that moment when I decided to answer that question of why and start doing the work of helping couples turn towards each other,
Mhm.
starting my practice, Shiloh Counseling here in St. Louis. I It was like this. There was a little bit of anger, a
Yeah.
little bit of not anger, and it's hard to explain. Maybe you can help, Justine.
Mhm.
You're a therapist too. You can help me
Mhm.
like
Yeah.
put some words to
Well,
it. But it's like this. It's a determination. It's a
uh-huh.
drawing a line in the sand of like
Yep.
no more. You'll take no more from
Right.
me, and also you'll take no more from them. Like you know,
Oh, yeah. Like,
um,
it is like my in some ways, like, my mama bear comes in, like, no.
yeah.
It's that parental
Hmm.
instinct because
Hmm.
also because we had to fight for it for so we
Mm,
had to fight for it a lot
mm,
more than some people have to, and so, like, it is like
right.
there is anger, I think, and
Hmm.
how anger is healthy,
Yep.
and I think there's a lot of us who we allow it to turn into contempt where it's not healthy,
100%. 100%.
and, like and for me, that would definitely be related to people's shame, like you've already talked about.
Mhm. Mhm.
So they're so intertwined, also really separate, along with
Mhm.
everything else, the stubbornness and the redemptive, like, just trying to, like, I will figure out how to make this okay, if not even better than okay.
Right. Right. It's Yeah, I almost see anger as like there's these different brushstrokes of it. You kind of alluded to that there,
Mhm.
Justine, of like, um, this protective, righteous
Mm. Yes.
anger, where
Yep.
that's I think that's really the purpose of anger for us
Yeah.
is to protect. That's what stirred up in me. That's
Mhm.
of this protective, you will no longer take from my wife, you'll no longer take from me. And not only that, but you're not going to take from my friends, you're not going to
Yeah.
take from this couple over
Yep.
here that's struggling. Um, and you're totally right. The other side of anger, I think, is kind of part of this tree of like, that's kind of this metaphor
Mhm.
that I like to use in therapy is like the branches are the anger, but below that, the trunk is this fear
Yeah.
that I'm going to be found out or that
Yeah.
and then the roots are shame. Um, so many times when I'm working with couples in the couple therapy space, shame is, as you know, Justine, is such a prevalent part of the infertility experience.
Mhm.
There's, am I man enough? Am I
Yeah.
woman enough? Am
Yep.
I, um,
Yep.
I did a research study looking at the experience of men going through infertility, and one theme that came up from time to time was this idea that I'm the weak link in the chain of the line of men in my
Oh
family.
my gosh.
Um, and so this shame doesn't want to be found out.
Nope.
Shame wants to stay hidden because if you, Justine, see my shame and you react with like, yeah, that is kind of bad. Like,
Yeah.
then that's gonna make
Right.
me feel like that shame is right, that
Yep.
I am not worth being seen. It's so what happens, it comes out as this kind of anxious anger almost.
Mhm.
I see this in the couple therapy space all the time where couples, will become critical of each other, they'll become defensive,
For sure.
they could totally emotionally misattuned with each other.
Yeah.
Um, it's one of the biggest drivers
Mhm.
of separation for couples going through fertility. In fact, it's one of the 4 pillars of what my research has shown that keeps couples together is emotional attunement. So being able to really be curious with each other through the infertility experience, and so whenever the doctors came in and said, "Oh, by the way, guys, we got some test results back for you, Clay. It's male factor infertility. Who knew?"
Yeah.
And that was that exact quote, and
Uh-huh.
it still lives with me. And
Yep.
and when Marjorie and I were walking out to the car, I was looking down at the ground, and she said, "Are you okay?" And I said, "Don't look at me. Just don't look at me. I'm, I just feel too much shame."
Yeah.
Um, and then for her to be like, "I love you. I'm
Yeah.
here with you. If you need space, that's okay, but I just wanna
Huh.
let you know I love you. I'm
Right.
here for it." So to be able to get down to the root
Yep.
and to attune that with each other is
Yeah.
so incredibly important.
Yeah.
And I
Well, and
think
it's
not
like
just through infertility, but through
all of
all
it.
kinds of it.
All of it.
Yeah.
'Cause it's I f for so many people, it feels easier to just be angry and to
Yeah.
be our anger than to
Mhm.
admit that it is hurt or loneliness or fear or the
Mhm.
deep shame that we all have around certain things that tells us all these different stories about who we are, or who we're supposed to be, or who we're not,
Right.
who we should be, all these different pieces. Like, it is and I love that story because the antidote to shame, because it does have an antidote, is
Mhm.
connection.
Mhm.
It's
Mhm.
love and empathy, compassion, it's true connection, which means we have to turn toward one another.
Mm. 100%.
Otherwise, we're
And
just alone in it.
yeah, this was something really interesting, Justine. So a research study that I did 2 years ago that I researched around 1,000 couples going through infertility, and, we found a lot of really interesting predictors of what brings couples together and what drives them apart, but one of the most interesting, things that brings couples together during the infertility experience is humility. And we weren't measuring this, we were
Mhm.
measuring we were measuring humility, but we
Yeah.
weren't measuring curiosity. That's what we weren't measuring, and I wonder if that humility and curiosity kinda go together.
Oh, yeah.
Um, if I
Ooh, yeah,
hey,
yeah.
when we were walking out to the car that day, Marjorie was curious with me, and
Uh-huh.
she was humble, and she was open-handed. She was like, "Well, what's going on?"
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's what really that curiosity is the antidote to
Yeah,
that
I
connection.
love that. I love that.
The curiosity bridges, uh,
Yes.
the connection's the antidote to the shame,
Uh-huh.
you know?
Well, and
Yeah.
it does so much of shame is about the stories that we tell ourselves. And like that
Yep.
it like for me, that is the pinnacle of the courage work for me. I want to help
Mhm.
people rewrite the stories that they tell themselves, the stories that they've
Right.
allowed to be spoken over to them, the stories that they've agreed to that were never true. And
Mm.
shame has written
Mhm.
so many of them for so many people. I mean, looking when as I teach the like those different because some of the hardest stories that you tell yourself are born of the some of the toughest seasons of your life. So
Right.
they're not great stories because they're born of the toughest seasons of your life.
Right.
And yet because of that, and because how
Mm.
complex trauma is and all of that, so it really puts deep roots into your brain, except they can when we really address the root system, we can rewrite
Mm.
them.
Mm.
I'm curious, Clay, like, so as you like, you're in this journey and you have this, it is like an epiphany of like, I'm going to take this back
Mhm.
and I'm going to take this back and
Mm.
I'm going to make good of this, do what I can to make good of this and rewriting that story. Was it, did Marjorie have her version of that? And I don't expect you to tell her version of it, but like, did she have
Mhm.
her version of that? What was it like for her to turn
Mm.
toward you as you're doing that? I mean, like, that's also a very big I'm going to go get my PhD. Like, and I'm going to change all my research to be this.
Mm.
Like, because it's twofold. There's two people in the journey, and yet we're one. So
Mm.
I'm just curious about what were the stories that she maybe had, or how did she support you rewriting that piece for yourself?
Mm. Huh. Uh, could this podcast be like a 2 or 3-parter? Because like, there's like
I know.
I got a lot. I got a lot. Gosh, I got to watch, uh I got to watch my wife rise from the ashes and, um, sing her song in a totally new way, and, of course, that's the metaphor of the phoenix,
Yeah.
and I remember when we were talking and praying together. Uh, which, as a side note, birds are, if people go to my website, drclaybrigance.com or Shiloh Counseling,
Yeah.
LLC.com, both have a lot of iconography of birds
Yep.
because that was a big symbol for us that kept us
Mhm.
going during that journey of it was almost like because we're spiritual people,
Yep.
we it was like when we would pray together, we would always hear this chorus of birds. And I don't mean just like a little sparrow, like it was
Yeah.
like we would hear these like flocks of sparrows outside that just would just erupt and it was almost like this reminder that we're not alone,
Yeah.
you know?
Yep.
Um, and so going back to your question, Justine, I think that, the phoenix is also a bird. Uh, but like that story is that, the phoenix is, it's this burning, um, you know,
Yeah.
avian creature, this burning
Yeah.
like bird who's like singing this song, and then eventually it turns to ash, but then it comes back and it
Mm.
sings a new song. So, so sweetheart, if you're listening to this, I want to talk to you for just a second. Here's what I saw you grow in. So I saw you grow in your confidence, your ability to set boundaries. So when people
Yes.
asked all kinds of questions about our family planning journey, what are we going to do with embryos?
Yeah.
You know, um, she had a hysterectomy, that was a part of our story, and so we
Yeah.
get asked a lot, "When are you gonna have more kids?" And we can't.
Right.
Um, and so to see her lovingly step into her confidence and just
Yeah.
say, I just don't think it's helpful for me to talk about that right now."
Yep.
It's I just like, oh, I feel so proud,
Uh-huh.
like, just for
Amazing.
her and people and it's so beautiful because it lands on people like, "Oh, okay." Like,
Yep.
it's not a contempt,
Mhm.
it's just "You can go here, but you
Yeah.
can't go here,"
Yep.
and that's okay. Um, and I saw her so for us, because you mentioned that we're one,
Yeah.
I told her I wanted to get a PhD, change my career, start a counseling practice, and, like, write all this research, start my own podcast, and, like, do all this stuff. Literally, she looked at me and she was like, "Oh, I was wondering how long it's gonna take you." You know?
Yep.
It was like
Yep.
this and, you know, I don't wanna be too explicit on gender. I know that we got a lot of
Please.
people listening to this different podcast. I wanna honor that and respect that. For myself as a male, I really need Marjorie to believe in me and for a lot of the men that I've worked with in
Yeah.
therapy, they need that like cheerleader. I don't, it doesn't have
Yeah.
to be female, but just like that
Yeah.
cheerleader,
They do.
and we all
Yep.
do as humans.
Yep.
Um, and so that every time I come up with like a crazy new thing that I want to
Yep.
accomplish or put out in the world,
I love it.
she's like, "Great!
Yep.
Like, what do you need from me?"
Yep.
And it's
How can I help
not
you
just
execute that? Like, yeah.
right.
Yep.
Yeah, and that's not saying it's a blank check. She does question me. She's,
Yeah.
like,
Right.
uh, every relationship is a boat, and every boat has a sail and an anchor,
Mhm.
and I'm the sail, and sometimes my sail is 15
Mhm.
miles wide, and her anchor holds me fast.
Mhm.
So,
Mhm. Oh,
um,
that's so good.
yeah, and
That's so
it
good.
changed the way that we interact with each other. We're
Mhm.
so open together,
Yep.
where we're able to talk about what do I feel in this moment because we had to. In
Right.
infertility, during
Right.
infertility, we had to have the courage,
Mhm.
right? This is the courage work for my
Yeah.
wife and I. We had to have the courage to be able to say, like, "I don't like that. That's annoying."
Right.
Like, I don't like, I'm taking progesterone shots not me, I'm
Exactly.
speaking as if I'm a wife. I didn't take any obviously,
Uh-huh.
but, like, I'm taking these progesterone shots. I don't have room for,
Correct.
that
Oh, yeah.
right now. And
Man.
and just and just to be able to practice that skill, and that's the
Mhm.
skill that I encourage the couples that I
Yes.
serve in couple therapy to have with each other, just to be open, not in a way
Yeah.
of like, "Ugh, like, you're so annoying,"
Yeah.
but just to be like, "Babe, I just don't have space for that. I love you, but I
Yep.
just"
Yeah.
you know,
Like, "These
and
hormones are
yeah.
pumping through my body. I need you to
Yep.
not do that again." Like
Right. Right, right.
like, will
Exactly.
not guarantee what happens next. Like,
Right.
it
100%.
was like that. It is one of those, like, seared moments, like, when we were in the journey, it was like, I feel like I have no control over what I'm feeling
Mm.
right now. I
Mhm.
feel the Clomid crazy train is just like, I mean,
Mhm.
it has left, and it is, like, full steam ahead, and this is what I think I need.
Mm.
And,
Mhm.
if you can't if you can't do that, then, like, I just need I need a minute. Like,
Yeah.
right? Like, because it was so
Right.
there's just so much in the infertility journey that's outside of your control, and yet it's so controlled. At the same time, it's like you're living
Mm.
in this
Mm.
complete tension all the time. And so it was like, I love your metaphor of the anchor and the sail. I mean, that it's a
Mhm.
great metaphor just for the partner that you choose through life, for goodness sakes. Like, they need to be a complement to you in so many ways. But when you are in
Mhm.
seasons where so much is out of your control, and there's so many stories, like,
Mm.
you gotta have that anchor, the sail to you.
Mhm. 100%. And,
It's so hard. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, for therapist nerds that might be listening to this, Justine, which I hope there
Yeah.
are,
I know.
you'll know about John Gottman and his
Yep.
research,
So
and
good.
Julie Gottman. So I'm a Gottman therapist, and a lot of our staff are trained in Gottman
Yeah.
therapy here at Shiloh. And um, one thing that I see couples slip into is this negative sentiment override. So that's just a big fancy term to mean that all of my colorings of your behavior as my partner, as
Oh,
my spouse, are hurtful, or
okay.
like I'm seeing the worst in you.
Yeah.
Um, that happens when we're experiencing more stress, more trauma. So going through the infertility
Yep.
experience, um, and um, we can engage in that positive sentiment override. So assuming goodwill
Yeah.
when we are expressing our shame, we're having the courage to
Mhm.
express our shame freely and having this back and forth
So good.
emotional connection.
Yeah.
Um, yeah.
That's so good.
Um,
That's so good.
yeah,
Okay. You ready for your last 2 questions?
I'm ready, Justine.
All right.
Born
So
ready.
the one you know that's coming. When did courage look different than you expected,
Mm,
and what did it teach you?
hmm. I think for me, Justine, it was recognizing that I do this scared, you know, you
Oh,
know,
oh,
like,
yes.
like that
Yeah.
is, uh, that's the big, and I'm feeling a lot of emotions rush over me right now. I think it's because um, it's such a powerful thing to recognize that my fear is there to serve me.
Mhm.
my anxiety wants to protect me. It's on my side.
Yes.
It's not always helpful,
Correct.
uh, but
Yep.
it's there. It's there to give me a message of this. You might be found out, Clay. You might get up there and do this podcast with Justine, and everybody thinks you're crazy. And like, people think that
Right.
this is like, Justine's going to be like, nope, not going to be on my podcast, like,
Delete. No, never.
too late. So like, I feel like, and I want your listeners to know in this moment, as I'm talking with you, though I consider you a good friend,
Yep.
Justine, though we don't spend
Yeah.
as much time together as I think we would like because our lives are crazy.
Yep.
Uh, I feel nervous right now in this moment because I want this message to get out there to
Yeah.
listeners. I want this to be a good episode for you.
Yes.
I want all those things.
Mhm.
And so this anxiety is trying to get me to freeze. It's trying to
Yep.
get me to leave the room. It's trying to all those things. And courage for me is talking to that fear and being grateful for it and
Yeah.
just saying, hey, whoa, whoa, whoa.
Yep.
Thanks, anxiety. Thanks, fear.
Yeah.
I really
Yeah.
appreciate you looking after me. And at the same time, um,
Mm.
I I'm going to do this.
Yeah. Like
I'm
I
gonna
got it. Yeah.
yeah, I'm gonna get up
Mhm.
in front of these
Yeah.
3,000 people
Yeah.
at this conference, and I'm gonna present my
Right.
research. And it may not be the most riveting thing that these counselors hear, but that's okay
Uh-huh.
because I'm gonna do it, and I'm gonna
Right.
do it scared
Yep.
because every time that I do it scared, it just reminds my body that it's safe. When
Exactly.
I move forward with that anxiety in the passenger seat, I'm driving.
Yep.
The fear is there in the passenger seat, and I can say, "Well, yep, hey, I appreciate you. We're
Yep.
still going down this road." It reminds my
Yeah.
body and my spirit that I'm safe and that I can do this and that
Yeah.
Justine doesn't think I'm crazy, that,
Right. Right.
uh, and this can be a beautiful conversation. And so
Yeah.
and something really powerful I want to share with your listeners, Justine, is that when you do that, the anxiety starts to get a little quieter. Still there.
Yes, it
It'll
does.
always be there.
It does.
Um, but
Yeah.
it'll get a little quieter and it will say like, well, are we okay? Oh, we're okay? Okay, good.
Yep.
Just check it
So
in,
true.
you know?
It's so good.
Um,
And like that's
yeah.
courage. I'm going to feel
Mhm.
this fear, acknowledge it. I often tell people like I want you to
Mm.
befriend your emotions, befriend them.
Yep. Yep.
They have a seat at the table. They don't get to sit at the
Mhm.
head, but
Mhm.
like they're not serving they're not even they don't even get to necessarily pass the dish around. Like right, but they're
Right.
there
Right.
and like and you're going to do the work to make sure love sits at the head of the table or courage sits at the head of the
Mm.
table, joy, like
Mhm.
right? Like
Mhm.
your identity, who you were created to be. But
Mm.
to to condemn or ignore or plow through that fear,
Mm.
it doesn't serve us and it's not courage because we do need like it is there for a reason. Like we have these
Right.
emotions for a reason.
Right.
We just most of us just weren't really taught how to deal with them well. Which is why
Right.
we will always have a job, Clay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
totally.
Yeah.
I had to take a second to process that, and it's totally true
Yep.
because I think that, I'm a Christian and, I recognize that, some of your listeners may be
Yep.
Christians, some are not, and that's, but something that is a part of my faith is recognizing that I am called to be the Lord's ears to listen, you know?
Oh, it's good.
And, uh, yeah.
Oh,
So,
it's good.
yeah. Just to reiterate that, Justine, it's,
Mhm.
I love doing this life. I can't believe, like, um, that I can't believe that I'm here. Sometimes I wake up in the morning and I'm just like, "Oh my goodness, I'm doing the work. I'm doing the
Yeah.
courage work,"
Yep. Yeah. Yep.
that's incredible.
It is.
And that's not to toot my own horn, but it's like it's recognizing where I came from.
Yes.
Um, I want to share something with your listeners that I have a tendency to overshare when I get really excited, but I'm going to share something with your listeners that not a lot of people know. Um, Post production, you could just edit this out if I'm oversharing, but just going to call it out. Uh,
Oh no.
no, yeah. So I had my first real public panic attack. It was March 4th, several years ago, March 4th. Um, and it was and I'm meeting with 10 other people, and I was about to like pass out, and there was like uh immediately everybody went into caretaking mode, and
Yeah.
it was great. I felt loved, but also felt really embarrassed.
Yeah.
And I remember going through the next 2 months of life thinking like, is this it? Like, do I have like, am I going to have panic attacks now? Like, is that a thing?
Yeah.
I did the work then. This was several years, I think 10 years ago. I did the work then. I went to therapy, did that work. Um, and so I intentionally opened my practice, Shiloh Counseling, on March 4th.
Oh my gosh.
Um, as like a like no,
That's a
like
reclaim. That's a reclamation.
yeah, totally. And also March 4th, like I'm gonna continue to March 4th. Like that was like a
Yeah.
thing
I love it.
for me. So it was like
Oh, that's so
yeah,
good.
it was like, hey, I can step into this
Yes.
calling. I can step into uh I have something to say,
Yep.
and I hope that people will hear it, and I hope that it'll resonate with somebody out there, and it'll be worth it.
Yeah.
And so to be able to step in that, um, I think is another thing that is really surprising to me about the
Yeah.
courage work.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
I love it. So good.
yeah,
So good. All right.
yeah.
Your surprise question. Ready?
Lay it on me.
Okay. What is something that you used to believe that
Mm,
you have reclaimed and rewritten, and how has
mm.
it changed your life?
I know immediately what to say. Uh, I'm not man enough.
Oh, yes.
Uh, you know,
Oh, that was good.
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? So I grew up in, a blue collar town in Kentucky. And mom and dad, if you're listening, I love you guys. You know how much I love you. My brother, I hope he's listening. He's one of the most incredible men I've ever met. Um, and also, I grew up in a family where I was very, very nerdy and intellectual and like I very bookish, And so, uh, my dad was a contractor for 40 years, and my brother's taken over the business. He's a contractor, and they're big, large men, and I am like 130 pounds soaking wet. So
Yep.
I had uh, this idea that to be a man, you needed to be able to fix things. You needed
Right.
to and you needed to be like a steady hand, like in all this. And so I realized that this is actually an Instagram reel that I put up about being man enough.
Yeah.
Which, by the way, people at Doctor underscore Clay Brigance. Um, I'm trash at social media, but I'm trying to get better. I'm trying to get
You're
better.
learning.
Uh,
You're
I'm
learning.
learning.
Yeah.
I am. I was born a 90-year-old British man, basically. And so I just like sit here in my tweed coat, just like, what's social media? Uh, but yeah, so growing up and recognizing that I have quirky humor and I have nerdy interests. I play D&D with my friends. Like
Mhm.
um,
You just
uh, I,
own it.
and yeah, and recognizing that that's a part of my masculinity,
Yeah.
and it's a beautiful part of my masculinity.
Mhm.
Um, and uh, so there was a study done looking at 10 different rhesus monkeys because rhesus monkeys, the the male rhesus monkeys tend to operate in packs,
Uh-huh.
and so they just took these rhesus monkeys and they just pumped them full of testosterone to see what would happen. Right. And
Okay.
so the hypothesis was that and they have an order. They have like alpha,
Right. Yeah.
beta, like A, B, C, like all the way down. So the hypothesis was that B was gonna like usurp A
Overtake
and
it.
it's gonna
Okay.
go up. Yeah. But what happened was that A made B's life a living hell. B made C's life. Like so there's
Wow.
this tendency in the world of masculinity to like push everybody else down and like
Wow.
that's toxic,
Yep.
that's
Yep.
toxic, obviously. I experienced that not from my family, but just from,
Mhm.
masculinity in general, and I
Yeah.
realized in doing this courage work, it really helped me to unravel that, to realize like,
Mhm.
"Wait a minute, like, I am man enough with what I bring to the
Uh-huh.
table," you know? Um,
For sure.
yeah,
Oh, that's so good. Thank you, my
yeah,
friend. Oh
yeah,
my gosh.
thank you.
I mean, I knew that this would be good, but seriously, you will not be
Good.
deleted. Like, not even close. Like,
Good.
not even close.
Good.
All right.
Awesome.
Where can my community connect with you if they would like to connect with you? Where's the best place to find you?
Yes, 100%. So, so look me up on, there's a few different ways. Go to the best way, www.drclaybrigance.com. You're going to find clips from my podcast, which I want to talk about in just a second. You're going to find information on the upcoming book. And also there's free resources. There's the infertility mental health manual that I wrote. It's just 25 pages of how to navigate the infertility experience, not only individually but as a couple. And that's a free downloadable resource that people can snag. Uh, so you could also check me out on social at Dr._Clay Brigance on Instagram. And my podcast is coming out in January of 2026. What are we, 2025 now?
Yeah.
2026. So, so I know we're kind of, I'm not sure when this episode will air, so I'm not sure when it'll fall, but it's going to be called Love and Infertility. And we've already interviewed some experts and couples. And what my co-host and I are going to be doing is discerning with people in real time what made them turn towards each other in the boat, during the infertility experience. And I just want to put out there that we're interviewing some experts and couples that have gone through infertility and loss, and their stories are hard. It's not this like rosy, like we had children and suddenly we were fine. Like it was, there's going to be people that decided to remain childless. There's going to be people that experience stillbirth. There's going to be, and everything in between. So I'm really, really excited.
I'm so excited
about that.
Good.
Yeah,
Well, thank you. Thank you for everything that you're doing.
absolutely.
Thank you for saying yes to this. I appreciate you.
Absolutely. It's an honor. I appreciate you, Justine.
Thank you. Thank you for listening to the Courage is Built Here podcast. Whether you're brand new to this work or living it out loud every day, I hope today was helpful, hopeful, and a reminder that you're not alone. What one bit of courage will you take from this episode, and how will you walk it out? If this episode encouraged you, share it with a friend, leave us a review, and please make sure you like and subscribe. New episodes come out every Wednesday on your favorite podcast platform and Fridays on YouTube. For more resources, head to JustineFroelker.com and click to my store. Because courage isn't a one-time thing, it's built right here, one small choice at a time, and especially between us.